how does technology allow us to actually be better at what we do?
Julien, is now the right time for a podcast like this?
Here's what I do know. I think there's an opportunity in front of us.
This industry is full of talented leaders.
If we can help our members find that one nugget, that one insight, we've just leveled up as leaders. What we're really going to try to do here in listening to our members is really lean into leadership.
Hello, my name is Mark Allen. I'm the president and CEO of the International Foodservice Distributors Association, or IFDA, as most of you probably know us. And today I'm excited to announce that IFDA is launching a new podcast called Crave. And our tagline is Fresh Leadership Insights. And we're gonna get into what all that means shortly, and why this podcast and why that name and what our intent is. I'm here with my good friend Julien LeBlanc, who IFDA is partnering with on our new podcast, and I am really super excited that we'll be working closely with Julien to launch what we believe will be a great new offering into food service. Julien, welcome.
Well, thank you, Mark. And I must say, I'm an excitable guy, but I am so pumped for this new journey. I think we're going to have so much fun learning and growing together as a community. How cool is that, Mark?
We're really excited to launch this podcast, Julien, and we're really excited to do it with you. But I think our listeners need to know today we're going to flip the script a little bit. Today I'm going to act as the host, and Julien will be the guest. So our intent in doing that is so you can learn a little bit about Julien and learn about the new IFDA podcast, which we're going to talk quite a bit about. But in the future, just so you know, Julien will be the monthly host of Crave. And Julien, I have to, just before we get started, I have to make one observation. I am in my office sitting here just outside Washington, D.C. It's a little bit overcast. I'm sitting at my desk with the windows behind my background, but I look at where you're sitting. That is a really cool studio. Tell us a little bit about that. Where are you, and what's the setup like?
Look, I'm joining you from Ottawa, Canada, in a warehouse that's been converted into a podcast studio. And I must say, I feel right at home. This is going to be our home for all of our Crave podcast series. And it's amazing. It's 2025, and it's like, welcome to technology meets, conversations, humanity. And I've got all the tools here, more importantly, Mark, that hopefully what our listeners will see is we'll have good sound, we'll have, I'm properly backlit here, so I hopefully look better than I actually look in person, Mark. So.
It looks fantastic. So it's just an inspiration seeing you in that studio. So that's wonderful. So Julien, let's get started, and I wanted to get started with a big picture. What's the inspiration behind Crave? And what do we hope listeners will take away from our new podcast?
Well, look, Mark, I think as someone that spent the last 15 years in learning and development, and we've had a successful partnership between Blueprint, my team, and I, and the IFDA team, I believe there's always opportunities to do more, to help our members have more impact, to help our members self-actualize, to help our members ultimately be better at what they do. And I've really leaned into this theory of meet people where they want to be met. And as we know, Mark, in 2025, a lot of people learn through podcasts, whether it's in their car ride, they're stuck in traffic, they're on the train, or they want to look at this through YouTube and even LinkedIn, because obviously we'll have all kinds of short videos if you want through LinkedIn and newsletters and so forth. So for me, it's all about meeting our listeners, i.e. the IFDA members, where they want to be met. And I think this is just an extension of all the great stuff we've done, whether it's Smart Conference, whether it's a Distribution Solution Conference, or other mediums that we've used in the past, Mark.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, 6-7 years ago, I had no idea what a podcast was, I'll be honest with you. And then you start to listen to them while you're out walking, you're on the treadmill, riding the bike, whatever it is, on your drive into work in the morning. And it is so much incredible content. in the podcast community, a lot in food service. So we're going to have our A game on, and I think I know we can do it. Food service industry has lots of podcasts. Why, Julien, is now the right time for a podcast like this? And what will differentiate what IFDA is going to do in the marketplace?
Look, I really think that this is a yes and, meaning there are some great podcasts in food service. And I love that, like you, Mark, I digest, I learn from some of these podcasts. But what we're really going to try to do here in listening to our members is really lean into leadership. And I think we're at a unique moment in time. And of course, every decade, I'm sure we say we're in a unique moment in time. But if you think of it, there's this awesome convergence that's taking place between technology, so let's call it AI, this opportunity to be better as humans, because as we know now, people's attention span is shorter than it's ever been. So I think by leaning into leadership, finding that white space that maybe the food service community that we're part of is not being served, and really leaning into that lane, that's how we're going to separate ourselves. If we have the right conversations and we're asking ourselves the right questions, I have no doubt that we're going to find that lane, and people literally won't wait. They'll be excited for the podcast so they can share it with their teams and maybe use this internally with their teams as well as a sort of rally cry to anchor around topics such as creativity, strategy, and all the various topics that we're going to attack together here.
Yeah, I love the focus on leadership. So we are really excited about that. Let's talk a little bit about you for a minute, Julien. You have a history in food service, starting your career with McCain, and your relationship with IFDA, your history with IFDA is long and deep. You've served as a conference speaker and a facilitator at various IFDA events, but you also have other endeavors unrelated to food service. And one of the things I love is you have this wonderful entrepreneurial streak. Our listeners are interested in learning more about your background and what led you to this point in your career. What makes Julien tick?
Couple of things. First of all, thank you. I'm going to view this as a huge compliment, because I think to be tagged as someone that's got the entrepreneurial spirit means that you're not afraid to try to find solutions, to try to solve problems. And ultimately, as you mentioned, 25 plus years in the food service business, whether as a manufacturer, so McCain Foods, PepsiCo, did all the various roles that one would in sales and marketing, all in the spirit of growing a business. I was never really on the optimization side of things, Mark. Obviously, cross-functionally working with my colleagues, but mostly always on the growth side. And what's amazing is in the last 12 years, I've been a president co-founder of a company called Blueprint. And what we do is we help people with their business confidence, if I were to oversimplify it. Whether it's strategic confidence, leadership confidence, getting to yes confidence, so selling, negotiating, handling objections. And in that space, what has blown me away, Mark, is my whole team comes from food. So our foundation, our heart is still in food. But you can imagine that when you replace the French fry with software or software with an insurance policy, the same leadership principles apply. And so what's happened over time is I've developed, I guess, an appetite, for lack of better words, of stretching myself outside the food business. So, for instance, I was co-founder of a company called Hearing Aid Rentals. So we rented hearing aids. And the reason we rented hearing aids, Mark, is my best friend is an audiologist, and the number one complaint we would get from people once they had a hearing loss was, man, these things are expensive. Or they couldn't afford the better technology, so they would literally point to their ear and say these things are too big, because the cheaper ones might not be as discreet as one might like for these hearing aids. So ultimately, what we did is we looked at other industries and said, well, hold on, no one's buying their iPhones anymore. For the most part, they're on a 2-year contract, 3-year contract. So why wouldn't we just rent hearing aids for 3 years? At the end of 3 years, we refurbish these hearing aids, and then we send them to foundations, a bit like Tom's shoes. So how cool is that? It completes the full circle. And really what we did, Mark, is we disrupted the industry in Canada in many ways, so much so that the biggest manufacturer of hearing aids in the world ended up buying us. And now they're going to be taking this across the world, which is exciting, because what we wanted to do is we wanted to help people hear better. How they chose to, whether it was to buy it or rent it, it didn't matter to us. So that's just one of the examples of my entrepreneurial journey. And what I've learned through this is the science of success absolutely transcends industries. So what I do now, Mark, is a bit of a reverse engineer where I dabble in these projects like hearing aid rental. I'm dabbling in a pickleball project these days as well as one should in 2025, where it feels like everybody's playing pickleball. But ultimately, it's about this notion of lift and shift. Is I want to take things that are working in other industries and see if it can't solve problems that are probably sitting next to them. And that's what I think is going to be cool in this podcast series, Mark, is as much as we're going to have conversations with our guests around the food business, we're going to also use examples of what we've seen outside food distribution. Because I think you would agree to this, the solution is probably sitting in a room next to us that we didn't know existed, but because we're sometimes a bit of tunnel vision, and it's not our fault, I mean, you become a byproduct of the industry you're in. So all that to say, Mark, is my heart is in the food business. I can't wait to continue to help all my colleagues and your members to level up while learning from other industries. And so it's going to be this nice convergence.
Yeah, it's interesting because the food business, Julian, is one of those things that gets in your blood, and it's kind of an anchor point for your career. Although you go out and do other things, you ultimately come back to food. And although it's a big industry, it to me always oftentimes feels quite small and intimate because people they might move around a little bit, but tend not to leave. And it's a rewarding industry. So I love to hear that story and love to hear that food continues to be a big part of who you are and what you're focused on. And love the idea about learning from other industries and then bringing that back, because I guarantee that you've got experiences or things that we're going to talk about in this podcast that are unrelated to food service that will have incredible meaning for our listeners and how they improve themselves personally or how they bring ideas back to their companies to improve or whatever that looks like. So super excited about that. So as I am out visiting with distributors, e-commerce almost always comes up as a topic of discussion. I had a great conversation a couple of weeks ago when I was on an IFDA member visit. E-commerce was top of mind, and they were talking about all of the investment they were making and the new functionality and how were using it to empower their salespeople and ultimately empower their customer. And it goes without saying that distributors are making significant investments in e-commerce capabilities each and every day. The new IFDA podcast, Crave, is brought to you by Cut and Dry. Cut and Dry is a leading e-commerce platform offering the ability for distributors and their manufacturer partners to promote and to sell more cases with an innovative operator user experience. And let's face it, who doesn't want to sell more cases or generate incremental revenue through digital advertising? And I want to just start out by saying thank you to Cut and Dry for supporting the new IFDA podcast. Well, Julien, you've been deeply involved in this industry, as you just stated, and have a long history with IFDA. What is it about food service distribution that excites you the most?
Well, look, let's build on e-com. I think there's an opportunity in front of us to have our cake and eat it too. And so let me unpack this. Every time I'm in front of DSRs or manufacturers or operators, so if we were to triangulate, is wow, I wish I had more time to do the stuff that I love, which is finding new menu ideas, playing with food, getting more creative, spending time working on the business versus in the business. So how do I drive more traffic? How do I get people to come into my restaurant one more time a week? If you're the food distributor, to come up with ideas that would help with product mix, for instance. Yet, what do we do most of the time as DSRs? We are taking orders. So we're kind of blocking and tackling when we could be really unleashing opportunities. So for me, as someone that, look, I'm not a technologist, Mark. I'm a humanist first, and I've leaned into technology because I want to be better as a leader. So think about this. We're in this industry that now has the technology to allow us to go back to the things that we absolutely love. So it's a bit of a back to the future moment, if you want. And that, to me, I think through these conversations, we're going to uncover so many great opportunities of how does technology allow us to actually be better at what we do and what we signed up for probably in our first job interview and got all excited that we were going to change the world, one kitchen at a time or one restaurant at a time. And so for me, and I think we both share that passion. What a moment in time. I mean, what a moment in time, Mark.
Yeah, I love one little term that you used in there, working on the business versus working in the business, and it is so easy to get consumed by what's happening in the business. And distributors, it's a tough business. It requires 100% of your attention. It's a lot of work, but it's a great reminder, maybe a challenge to our listeners to maybe use this podcast as a way to kind of rise above and maybe dedicate part of the day toward working on the business or a percentage of the week or whatever that is. So I love that phrase. I've heard you use that before. I use it quite often. And to me, it's just a great reminder that although the work's got to get done, sometimes you got to be able to step away, rise above, and focus on the bigger things. And this podcast, in my mind, hits right at the heart of that. Right at the heart of that.
I want to play off of this because I think there's two calls to action. I remember my coach one time, you'll love this, Mark. It was January, went through all my priorities for the year. And I was so excited, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then what he said next, it really hit me where he said, okay, Julien, fantastic. Let's open your calendar and see where this is scheduled. And I had that face of, it is not in my schedule. And imagine if Crave was in your weekly schedule. No, seriously, 1 hour a week, whether it's for yourself and your team to listen to this and then think it through. What does that mean for my business? So what for me? So what for my business partners? So what for my teammates? And this notion of on the business versus in the business, there's a statistic that probably I think about a little too much, but I think it's healthy when you have a little bit of fear on statistics. And you might have heard this stat, Mark, is it came from E-Myth. There was a famous book that was written called E-Myth by Mitch Gerber. And basically, the statistic was this: 96% of businesses don't see year 10.
Wow.
96. Now, doesn't mean they've gone bankrupt. They could have ran out of energy. And that includes the Tax Delaware Corp. But nevertheless, there's about 1 million businesses that incorporate in North America every year, if you look at the last 25 years. And only 4% see year 10. And their number one insight was not because they run out of money, not because they didn't adapt, they didn't spend enough time working on the business. They were so busy in it that who was thinking about the next e-com platform? Who was thinking about the marketing, doing a SWOT on the local markets that they're in? So I love this call to action. Let's work on the business together. And imagine if it was almost like a habit that was created on a weekly basis. I think we would all benefit from that, wouldn't we?
Absolutely. I love that. Let's get it in our calendars. It's a great way to kind of take that insight and convert it into action.
Love it.
So the new tagline for the IFDA podcast is Fresh Leadership Insights. We've already established that leadership will clearly be an overriding theme for the podcast and the discussions that you're going to have coming up, Julien, with many, many great leaders. But what are some of the biggest leadership opportunities that you've faced or observed in the industry?
Before I go there, I want to share an interesting thought around leadership. As I was getting ready for this pod on the weekend, I bumped into an interesting stat again, which was if you were to go on Amazon and write the word leadership for books, there's over 50,000 books with the word leadership in it. So what that says, Mark, is leadership is an art and not a science. What it is, ideally, is a lot of science within the art. So if you think of topics such as creativity, creative, like lateral thinking, strategy, partnering differently, collaborating. Wow. if we can help our members find that one nugget, that one insight, that once a week when they look at their calendar and it's time to listen to Crave, we've just leveled up as leaders. And here's what I do know in this industry. We have incredible leaders. Like, I would put our leaders in any industry, and they would, if you can survive in this business, you can survive in any business. I mean,
isn't that true, right?
it's coming at you left, right, center. You have to be agile. You have to pivot. You have to deal with all the various factors that are thrown at us. So the game plan is, they're going to be leadership conversations. And for instance, the first month, we're really going to focus around collaboration. What does collaboration look like internally, externally with your business partners? What are some tools that we can use? Are there stories that can inspire us to be better at it? And then we'll kind of move through these various topics throughout the year. So, I guess, Mark, we could spend a whole podcast unpacking that, but I'll leave that for the monthly topic. So we're going to look at leadership and chunk away at it in a very systematic way throughout the year.
Yeah, for sure. And we've, like I said, we've got an incredible slate of great industry leaders. And I think the more I immerse myself in podcasts, the more I find the format to be really, really beneficial for what we're trying to accomplish around leadership. Listening to people that have been there, done it, performed at the very highest levels. And I think we're going to impart a lot of ideas, information, and things that our listeners can take back to benefit them. Hey, Julien, one of the things I really admire is the fact that you are a lifelong learner and always looking for new ideas. And I honestly learn something new in each of our interactions. And I try to take something that we've talked about and use it, whether it's with my team or opening a conference, whatever that might be. I always get an idea. But the question I had was, who are some of the leaders or mentors that have influenced you, and what lessons have stuck with you through that process?
Yeah, I mean, look, as you know, Mark, I believe in the power of mentorship, and I believe in this notion of you kind of become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, as the famous Jim Rohn once said. So I've really leaned into mentorship all the way back to my tennis days. So before I honed my craft, if you want, in the food service business / consultancy, training and development, and facilitation, tennis was really where I formed my mindset, developed all the attributes necessary to obviously succeed in this business, like grit and resiliency and bounce back and confidence. And so I'll just maybe highlight 2 members. And like you, Mark, you're always afraid to highlight one because I have so many. So, but I am going to highlight 2. And I'm going to highlight this gentleman that I was very fortunate to work with his kids when I was going through university. And he was a radiologist in St. John, New Brunswick, so a Canadian. His name's Mike Barry. And Mike was a phenomenal tennis player, a phenomenal dad, and also someone that, if I would have looked at his plate, how does he also have time to be the president of the local Chamber of Commerce? He was one of those people, Mark, that he just wanted to have impact, and he was so curious. And I remember at night, once I was done coaching and we'd have dinner, because I was literally living with their family for 2 months, which was amazing. I did that for 2 years. It was always, hey, Julien, tell me about this. What do you think about that? So what marked me at that young age, Mark, is here was someone that was super successful, yet wanted to learn from me, a 19-year-old kid that didn't have that experience, that life experience that he had. And I remember thinking, I will never lose curiosity, because that's how you keep your edge. That's how you stay on top of your game. That's how you stay humble. That's how you meet great people. That's how you add value in this world. So Mike Barry, phenomenal mentor that I think about quite a bit still to this day, because he really developed my curiosity muscle, if that's such a thing. The second mentor is, and again, I've had so many great mentors in the food business, but as I transition from, let's call it the commercial side of being a sales leader, I was very fortunate to be the first hire of the McCain Learning Center. And I can say this now because there's enough space, but McCain, I can't believe you paid me to do this, because for 4 years, I got to travel the world and worked in over 48 countries, helping our business units unlock their full potential. And I was fortunate to have a boss, a mentor, and now really a mentor and a friend, and her name is Dr. Mary McNiven. Mary, what she helped me develop was my voice as a facilitator, a coach. And when I think back of these two individuals, and Mark, honestly, I've never had a bad boss. I've never been on a bad team, because I always find ways to celebrate the good, even though we all have weaknesses and opportunities for development. But I did want to highlight Mike and Mary, because, I mean, the impact they had on me at a young age, and then as I was transitioning to do what I was meant to do, which is what I'm doing here today, facilitating and hosting Crave.
Yeah, boy, that mentor relationship, finding a good mentor is absolutely so critical, and something I would challenge each of our listeners to take advantage of if they have an opportunity um, to establish that. I mean, you can see the impact it had on you. Curiosity, executive presence, stage presence, facilitation. We've used you for all of that, and it's all incredibly strong. So you can see the impact that those two individuals had on you and how you carry yourself each and every day.
I really appreciate that. And, the one thing that I really have to mention as well is they're both amazing humans that were role models as dads, as moms, as community citizens, philanthropy. So to me, I was getting the whole package, that it's not what you get, it's what you give back. It's a giving mindset versus a taking mindset. And both of them have that in spade. And, Mark, you mentioned mentorship. I would also challenge all our listeners to find a reverse mentor. I'm going to play the ageism card here for a second, but I am fascinated with AI, as I'm sure you are, knowing your mindset, Mark. So look, a lot of, I'm going to use the word kids, but if you think of people that are doing, I don't know, a computer engineering degree in today, well, chances are they're playing with AR a little bit more than someone that maybe is my age or older than me. So reverse mentor is finding someone that maybe doesn't have as much business experience as you do, but they have something that you could learn from, and then of course you would give back. So finding a reverse mentor in areas that you think could benefit, I think, is a quick win that we could all go get, my friends.
Oh, that's an awesome, wonderful idea, and something that most people probably aren't thinking of. I love that idea.
Yeah, and look, Mark, I'm going to get to interview you down the road. So, but give me a little bit of a teaser. There's got to be one mentor, and I realize it's dangerous as well, because I know you've got a lot of mentor. Like, I think of even your current board and the role that some of your board members have had on you. But is there a mentor that's helped shape you as a growth mindset leader?
Yeah, I would, without naming any names, I would say I have worked with some wonderful uh, chairwomen of our board of directors, and I have learned something from each and every one of them. They all operate different. They all have different temperaments. They come from different parts of the country. They run different sized businesses. Their customer mix is different. But just watching how they solve problems, how they kind of inspire a team, listening. It really taught me early on that listening is probably the most critical communication skill that you can have. I realized early that they didn't always have all the answers, but they were really committed to getting to the best answer and using the resources around them, whether that was the board or the staff, to get to that answer. They have all had incredible temperaments. They all have an executive presence, bigger than life, running wonderful companies, very successful at their chosen path. And I could say of the eight, I don't know how many chair people I've worked for, maybe 8 or 9. I could probably list 3 things that I learned from each and every one of them. For me, it's been really the thrill of a lifetime, the opportunity of a lifetime.
Mentorship comes in so many different shapes or forms, whether it's informal, formal, I mentioned reverse mentor. I joked that Ted Lasso is my mentor. You mentioned curiosity, and the first thing I thought of, or listening aggressively, is I love that. And you probably remember that clip from Ted Lasso. I'm sure you've seen it. If you haven't seen Ted Lasso, to all of you, you should definitely put that on your must do as a leader. But he talked about being curious and not judgmental. And it's funny that if I look at probably the best piece of mentorship this year that I've received was from a TV character. And if you think of what we're going to do in Crave, my hope is that some of our guests will become mentors indirectly to some of the members as well. Because you don't need to have necessarily a let's go to coffee and have a mentorship conversation. Mentorship could be, I might become a mentor to some of you by just representing your voice and asking questions and going deep with some of our experts and passionate leaders that we're going to have conversations with.
It's really a powerful concept. You can just observe success and work to emulate it or to understand why. To me, the big part is why. Why did you approach that problem that way, or why did you kind of drive to consensus in that way? And it's really interesting what you can learn. And I think you mentioned earlier, this industry is full of talented leaders, whether it's the CEO of the company or the people down within the business. Distributors tend to run pretty lean businesses, and people have to be really, really good at what they do.
Look, I think that really leads to a few philosophies, because today's all about getting to really set the stage for what we're going to attack together as a group through this podcast. Is my job is going to be to make sure that we really get to that third and fourth why. So when we get the answer, Mark, you give me an answer. My job is to dig in. Tell me more. Help me understand. Because my belief is that if we can get to that third why, that's where we're going to get a nugget where people are like, stop the presses. We got to go execute on that. This notion of tell me more, digging in, and 1% better, I think that's what we're going to attack.
I think we're going to get some insight into 5-year-old Julien. Why curious and asking why. And my God, at some point, for a lot of us, society tends to take that away, but successful people kind of continue to have that why, and the curiosity, and how do they get better. And
I think, look, my hairline won't reflect that, and my eyes might not reflect that, but I do feel like a 5-year-old, because what a great opportunity to have conversations and learn something new in every single conversation. And for our friends, Mark, that have more of an operational background, if you think of Kaizen, continuous improvement, Lean, Six Sigma, all of that is based on get yourself to the third why, and you're going to find the opportunity within your distribution center, within your route. And so why wouldn't we take that same mindset to conversations?
So Julien, as we begin to close this out, how can listeners get involved in the conversations that you're going to have with these wonderful leaders? What's the best way for them to find us and to kind of engage and share their thoughts and share their experiences?
Well, look, we all learn differently, so I would encourage you to obviously use your favorite medium to go find this information, but we're going to meet you where you want to be met. So I'm just going to share a couple of examples. We're going to lean heavily into LinkedIn, but LinkedIn will be what I'm calling these 90 seconds or 2-minute highlight reels from conversations. So these are very shareable. So I will encourage you to comment, like. These will be on the IFDA LinkedIn site. I'll put them on my site. We'll ask our guests to do the same. So really create this community of practice. That's one area. We're going to have a YouTube site. We're going to obviously have, because a lot of you will digest this from an audio standpoint, so we will use Spotify and Apple. So kind of play with those two ecosystems. And of course, I will go old school, and my email will be available, because we are always looking for ideas, thoughts. I'm into continuous improvement as well. So if you say, hey, Julien, we'd want you to ask these types of questions, I'm here to represent the members. It's an absolute privilege that I have. And as my tennis coach used to say, pressure is a privilege. So I'm going to lean into this privilege. Yeah. And I am just here to curate good conversations on behalf of the members, Mark. And I would encourage you as well. So here's my call to action in your travels. if you bump into anybody that you say, wow, we need to have a conversation, send them my way. And for all of you members, if you have people in your ecosystem or sphere of influence that you say you absolutely have to talk to them, I would love to hear that. And I think what's important is, let's call it 60 to 70% of our guests will be from our industry. I would like to have 30 to 40%, and we already have some good guests lined up, that are not from our industry. For instance, they might be in the hotel business. They might work in amusement parks. They might come from Silicon Valley. They might be professors at universities or colleges, because that's how we're going to do the lift and shift play and really kind of bring back these learnings. I really, really appreciate you doing this kind of reverse podcast if you want. And if this IFDA gig doesn't work out, I can see you as a podcaster. That was a great sign off, great voice. And all kidding aside, what a great opportunity to be a force multiplier through this medium, so that together is better. And this industry has been just so wonderful to me, and I can't wait to give back as much as I can by representing all of you and really digging in with our guests. And with that said, subscribe, share. I mean, we're going to make this so it's shareable, because we want everybody to crave the next podcast and leadership insights from our leaders. So with that said, Mark, go get them.
This episode is brought to you by Cut & Dry, the only independently verified digital ordering platform that combines e-commerce, payments, and sales tools to help food service distributors sell over 10% more cases within a year. Here's the truth. E-commerce isn't just about going digital. It's about getting discovered. That's why, since 2009, Cut & Dry has led the industry in transforming your inventory into online custom apps that are easy to search, explore, and for your customers to uncover new products. Join us today at cutandDry.com.